Good morning and welcome to the first market update video of 2024. Let's begin with a reminder of how markets performed in 2023. Here's the chart for three different indices: the Dow Jones, the S&P 500 and the FTSE. These are total return figures including dividends. You can see it was a very positive year overall. We've had a couple of questions about the relatively strong performance of the S&P 500. It was up over 26%, whereas the Dow Jones gained less than 15%. And part of the reason for this is the difference in how these indices are constructed. The S&P 500 is what's known as a market cap weighted index. There are 500 stocks in the S&P 500, but their weight is based on the size of each company. So this means that the big tech stocks like Microsoft and Amazon, both of which are worth over $2.8 trillion, have a big impact on how the index moves. Here are the top 10 constituents of the index. Microsoft overtook Apple this week to become the biggest. These top 10 account for over 30%, and that means that the other 490 stocks account for the remaining 70-odd%. We can also measure the performance of what's called the S&P 500 Equal Weighted Index, which is how the index would look if each of the 500 companies was given an equal weighting. Here's a chart comparing the performance of the two indices last year, and you can see that the original S&P is significantly ahead of the Equal Weighted Index because those big tech companies had such a good year and they make up so much of the index. The Dow Jones doesn't use this market cap weighted method, and therefore you would expect it to underperform in a year when tech is doing particularly well. The reason for the strong market performance last year was the belief that central banks had finally got inflation under control and that interest rates would therefore start to come down this year. This year so far, however, there has been a sense that perhaps interest rates might not come down quite as soon as some people are hoping for, and this has led to a slightly muted start to the year for equity markets. Here are the performances of the major indices for this year so far, and you can see it has been a slightly weak start. One reason for this is the ongoing unrest in the Middle East, which is putting upwards pressure on the price of oil, which could prevent inflation from continuing to fall. The Houthis are continuing to target ships in the Red Sea, and this has caused many shipping companies to divert their ships away from the Red Sea. The new shipping routes are much longer and more expensive, and if this continues for a long time, these higher shipping costs could lead to higher inflation. The latest inflation figures for the US were released this week, and they were slightly higher than expected. But if we look at the detail, a lot of the increase actually came from the higher cost of car insurance. Car prices themselves have risen a lot in the last couple of years, and this will have led to a delayed increase in the price of insurance. We'll be looking at the next set of inflation data very closely to see if these higher shipping costs and oil prices are feeding through. And finally, Boeing shares have fallen heavily after a door plug on one of its 737 MAX 9 aircraft blew off mid-flight. Boeing had promised to prioritize safety after the tragedies with the two 737 MAX 8 aircraft that crashed in 2018 and 2019, but the latest issues suggest that ongoing problems with its quality control are continuing. The market for airplanes is virtually a duopoly, with Boeing and Airbus the only two major providers. Here's a 10-year comparison of their share prices. Boeing was ahead until it was found to be at fault for those two crashes. Both share prices came down a lot during COVID, but Airbus has moved ahead significantly since then. Airbus currently has an order backlog of over 10 years. Do give us a call to hear more about our thoughts on these two companies. Moving on to next week, it is starting to pick up on the corporate calendar as we are moving into reporting season. Next week is a busy one for miners. We are expecting results out from Rio Tinto, Antofagasta and BHP. That's it from us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.